Welcome to the Women Who Change the World podcast, the place where everyday women world changers share their stories to inspire, challenge, and equip you to change your world.
Hi, this is Lori Miller. I'm coming to you today with excitement for our first ad, and here we are on Samantha's podcast. So thrilled. So to tell you a little bit about ourselves, we're a tea boutique company, mother and daughter, Victoria and myself, Lori. We're a team My Loyal Tea Company, might as well say that here. We have premium, organic, loose leaf tea. We want to get the toxins out of your bodies. We're very active on Instagram and Facebook at My Loyal Tea Company, LOYALTEA Company, all spelled out. And our website is myloyalteacompany.com. So come join the fun.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Women Who Change the World podcast. I have talked about this in my intro podcast, and if you are a personal friend of mine, you know I have been talking about this interview. I've been so excited. I am interviewing my friend Lily, who works for the UN, doing the job that I wanted to do, and instead I got married and had kids, which was not in my plan, but we can talk about that another day. Lily is here to share her story on what she does working for the UN and how she is changing the world one family at a time. How are you, Lily?
I'm good, Samantha. It's lovely to be with you, and thanks so much for the beautiful intro. And I just look forward to this discussion.
Speaking of intro, she gave me her intro, and I'm not going to read it because if I did, I would be a fangirl, and you guys would already think I'm more crazy than what I am. So, Lily, why don't you tell us about this lovely intro here of yourself? And I'm going to tell you, she's an amazing woman. Don't let her fool you. So,
hey, Samantha, thank you so much for that. Listen, I am Lily. I was born in Kenya, in the western part of Kenya, and had parents who were both working. And my upbringing actually, surprisingly, was very good and just very nurtured and just encouraged from the get-go. But I knew that when I was a little girl, I had this compassion for other people. I was always that kid that always took care of others. I wanted them to be happy, to be taken care of. And something that I hated with everything within me was injustice. If I saw anybody being cruel, anybody being mean, that was something that really broke my heart. And so, of course, my parents went to work in a neighboring country called Uganda. And that was the first place where I encountered what conflicts and armed conflict is, because during that time, one of the army generals took over power. And if I know most of you might have heard of a Mr. Idi Amin Dada. I lived through that reign of terror, and I saw what military rule looked like. And then when I was 13, we went back to my country of origin, Kenya, and I continued my studies. When I went to the university later on, I studied political science and linguistics. And so with that, somehow after the graduation, my parents had hoped that I would study law the way they did, but I did political science. So after that, I went into journalism for some reason. So I went and studied journalism, and then I became a journalist. And when I became a journalist, I was home. It just connected with who I was, because I was covering stories about people who were, in dire situations. And I loved the fact that I gave them the voice. I was a voice for the voiceless. And so I continued. And one time, as I did that work, I met this gentleman who worked for the UN Humanitarian News Service. And this guy, we talked and we exchanged contacts. And he told me that, actually, we usually take people from working for the international news services to cover for us when our own staff are on leave or on assignments. So then it happened that in 1998, December, I was on leave. So I called up this editor and said, look, I'm going on leave. I don't know if you guys need anybody to cover for you during this period. The guy said, oh, listen, really this year we're okay, but I want you to come to our offices in January of 99. So for a 3 days trial. And basically the trial was, they were going to teach me their house style, you know, how they cover their news stories and all that. I went there the first day and they were so happy with my work. The second day, they were like super happy. The third day, they were so, so happy. And they said, you know what? Why don't you stay with us for 1 week? So I said, listen, there's nothing to lose. I'm on holiday anyways. So I stayed for the 1 week before it ended. They said, how about you stay with us for 2 weeks? So they extended the contract for 2 weeks. And I said, yeah, you know what? Then they said, listen, within the 2 weeks, they said, oh, maybe stay with us for 1 month. We're going to give you a contract for 1 month. So I had to call I was working for the German press agency then, covering 14 countries from out of Nairobi. And so I called my boss and I said, sorry, you know what? I think I'm sticking with this. I loved working with that team, and we were covering all the conflicts that were in East Africa, Central Africa that time. And it was just me. So I worked in Nairobi with the UN for 4 years. And then I moved to West Africa, Abidjan in Ivory Coast. There I was for 5 years. And there I saw so many things that maybe I'll discuss later. And then from Abidjan, I moved to New York. I was in New York for 9 years. And now, since 2014, I'm in Geneva. I've been in Geneva since 2014, with a break of 2 years when I went back to Africa to work in Uganda. So that was 2017 to 2019. Then I came back to Geneva. But I know that I've been in the UN now for 22 years. Starting from that 3 days trial, the 3 days, basically the UN found me. I did not apply for any job at that point, but somehow God knew that this was the path that I was supposed to follow. And frankly speaking, it aligned with the core values that I have, and of helping people, just helping people. And that's what I did from the time I was little. I was the one that was out there looking out for other people. So it's been a journey of my life. Yes.
Are you still a journalist for the UN?
No. So by the time I moved to Ivory Coast, I actually worked on journalism for 2 years. And then I moved to a different arm of the United Nations, and that was the United Nations peacekeeping operation. So then when I went there, I was still in the communication and political side of the mission. But then I kind of just transitioned from the journalism into mainstay of the UN's work. And there I was in the communication, still liaising with all the other peacekeeping missions that were in West Africa. And then I grew. By the time I came to New York, I moved on into what is called risk management, early warning and risk management. So then there, again, I was using my communication and journalistic and political background, but now using it in a very different way, where I looked at risks around countries in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, political stabilities, and looking at what the UN can do to mitigate or to respond to those crises. Because most of the time, when you see conflict or political disturbances, they always have an impact on people. And so that was my job, being the eyes and the ears of the organization and alerting them when I saw situations changing. And then we would move in and do certain things using, diplomacy, or just using programmatic kind of interventions in these countries.
Oh, okay. Wow. So that was a big change from just reporting about the stories, but to actually being intimately part of the story as it's happening.
Yes, and the response, basically, like being part of the response, because from New York, I would go deploy in country and be in the middle of responding to the needs of people who were displaced by conflict, armed conflict, people who were, ran for their lives to neighboring countries, coordinating, finding what their needs are, whether it's food, it's water, it's medicines, it's protection, because sometimes they're exposed. And so when they're exposed, there's also the violence against women, gender-based violence. So those kind of things was kind of my work, to go help assess what their needs are, and then coordinate with all the UN system, the different agencies within the UN who are mandated to carry out work in the health field. I know you know WHO, World Health Organization, for example. There's also the World Food Program. There is UNICEF with the children. There is UN Women for the women. So there are so many different entities within the UN, but they all have different areas of work. And that has been my job, to try and bring them together, alert them to the needs of what is happening, and then they bring in the help. And right now in Geneva, actually, I'm now fundraising for that help to happen in the field. So fundraising with the different member states.
You've answered like 3 of my questions.
Oh,
It's
really?
just that you really. So I guess I was on the right path in how I was thinking. But I want to ask a couple of hard questions, though.
Yes.
In your work experience, in your in-field experience, what was the worst thing you've ever seen and had to emotionally deal with?
Oh, wow. Well, that is, it brings back memories that sometimes follow us as practitioners in this field. And it brings out, the good side and the bad side of humanity. And some things that you know are unimaginable. So, for example, as I said, that I lived in Uganda as a child. I grew up in Uganda, where there was a dictator who did really atrocious things to people. And then work-wise, I've moved into this area of humanitarian work and development, and working in West Africa. East Africa also, there were some very brutal conflicts that left people displaced, and people running across borders as refugees, and going out there to talk to them and seeing the conditions, and knowing that they ran with the clothes, just the clothes on their backs. Them telling us stories, some of them come with wounds, machete wounds on their, and they don't know where the rest of their families are, and they don't even know whether they'd ever see them again. So things that you look at and you know that these were caused by fellow human beings, they're things that kind of, they're just mind-boggling. And then I went to West Africa, and that was the time when the country called Sierra Leone was in the middle of an 11-year long conflict, civil war. And there was a rebel group called the Revolutionary United Front. And this group did the most heinous crimes and crimes against humanity. And they would chop off people's arms and people's legs. They would even ask, once they arrested you, they would ask whether you want a long sleeve or a short sleeve. And that means the long sleeve means they chop your hand off the wrist. And then the short sleeve means they chop your hand just by around your shoulder, off your shoulder. And it's just the upper part of the arm. And they did these things. They recruited children and made them, they recruited them to fight, to be fighters. These are young kids, some of them 9-year-olds. I went there, I met, small little kids with this AK-41, gun. And I was told, I have to respect them, because within the ranks of the rebel group, they are very high up. So I need to talk to them with respect because they have the gun. And I went to the mines in a place called Kono in Sierra Leone. That is where the rebels were using these children to mine the diamonds. I know, most of you may have heard of the Blood Diamonds. That was a film. some years. It was based on on this whole civil war. And then the young girls were recruited by these rebel groups to be their porters and to be their wives. And it is just so horrendous. And you look at them and you wonder what happened. And this rebel group actually killed journalists. They killed journalists. And there were so many. I remember there was an Associated Press journalist who was murdered by this. 3 journalists were murdered by this rebel group. Then you go to Liberia, there was another civil war, all the same atrocities, and the other countries. So I've seen these things, and sometimes I'm just like, what am I going to do? You find people displaced, they're just in a field or they're caught up in bushes. So you're trying to reach out and bring them together, and they have nothing. Then you're there, like in a field with people who some of them were injured in the crossfire, they have all these things going on, and you want to get them help immediately. So it is something that I say that by God's grace, somehow you keep it together and you do what you got to do. Then there are also certain things that I've seen, cultural practices that just, for example, Somalia and even Kenya, I've encountered communities that do female circumcision. And I found out that it's actually the women, the mothers, who insist their daughter needs to do this because no man is going to marry them. And what they do is just wrong, because in the Somalian style it's just really mind-boggling, because they take out the clitoris of the girl, and this is an 8-year-old girl. They will take out the cut off that whole thing, and then they sew up the girl. And it is believed that when the girl gets married, the husband is supposed to penetrate and open. It's just crazy. So the UN, we deal with such kind of mindset and cultural, deeply embedded cultural practices, and we do that. It's a painful process because it takes years to change those mindsets, but that is part of the work that we do, and we are usually there in it for the long haul. And so those have been some of my very seeing really bloody, brutal wars and conflicts that affect mostly women and girls. They are the most vulnerable, seeing that over and over. Right now, as we speak, we still know that there is conflict in Syria, for example. Mm-hmm. We know that Iraq is still in conflict. We know that South Sudan is still in conflict. We know that Democratic Republic of Congo is still in conflict. And the things that go on in these conflicts are just, you can't even imagine, that these are human beings, fellow human beings doing that. So those have been some of the low points in my life. Like I've looked and I feel like helpless and yet I can't afford to be hopeless, because what they're going through is way much more. I have to figure out how to help.
So besides, in this past year, besides COVID, because I know the UN's been all over COVID, I think there was a song that came out that the World Health Organization was praising a K-pop song. I think it was called House Party, about how it's all about wearing your mask, taking care of yourself, and like that. So besides the UN being heavily involved with COVID, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced this past year? And how did you use it to create change?
So, yes, the biggest challenge for us was actually having COVID come on top of this massive, long, protracted crisis. Because as COVID came in, by then we had around 57 or 55 countries mired in conflicts that started 20 years ago. Wow. And basically our work in these places, whether it is in Syria, whether it is in Afghanistan, whether it is in Iraq, whether it's in all the countries in Africa that are still in conflict situations, is to provide, it's taking care of a human being from morning till evening every day. And we've done this, like these cases have been on for like 20 something years. So how do you get that? How do you get that going? Because they need food. The kids need to be, go to school. They need water. They need livelihood. They need everything, shelter, everything. So we had that caseload, and I remember that the appeal that we had put out for humanitarian appeal, because that's what we do here, was around, we were looking for around 29 billion US dollars for 2020. Yeah, to help, to enable the UN and its partners, the NGOs, to respond to the needs of these millions of people. Because as I speak right now, we have 160 million people around the world who need humanitarian response, who need livelihood, they need life-saving kind of interventions. And so on top of that, then came COVID. And most of the countries in conflict are countries that are very least developed. So we had to very quickly come up with a package that we would put before donors and say, listen, these are countries, if they go down, the whole world is unsafe. Because with COVID, any of us, which is where we still have cases, means the whole world is still at
risk.
Yes, at a risk. So then we said, these are already the vulnerable ones. What are we going to do? So we had to come up with the amounts also to appeal for us to help countries, put up the PPEs, the equipments and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big challenge, because already you have a budget of, you're looking for 29 billion. Then you come up with another, and you know how COVID is, because right now, even for them to get vaccines and all that stuff, they don't have the money. It's got to come from somewhere. Right. And normally the United Nations is the neutral arbiter and partner that can appeal on behalf of these countries and come to the countries that may have more to help these other ones out. Because if we don't help them out, then we are all at risk.
Right.
So that has been a big problem. And I must tell you that we have seen generosity of countries, of member states, really just realizing, in as much as, member states are also suffering, their own countries are really, really reeling through this COVID, because it's affected the economic situations, everything is down.
Yes.
So they are also suffering, but still they are willing to put in something, to help these other countries. So that is a big part of it. And the other big one that affected our work is access. Yes. Because with no
everything was shut down.
Everything was shut down. Everybody was at home. So how do you respond? How do you respond to the needs of people? So what helped us was that since the United Nations, we have our presence is in 193 countries. So we relied a lot on the local staff, like the local staff and the local NGOs to help us, but still, I know we had movements because, for example, the World Food Program has an airplanes that take food to different places. So they had the permit at least to fly, but still that could have, really stalled us. We found ways around it because we deal with emergencies all the time. So we kind of found ways around it, but that has been one big hassle. It was a big one in the beginning. Yeah, because how do you do it when there are no flights going anywhere? We can't move,
I think we had a fundraising video, like a show. I think Lady Gaga was involved in it.
Yeah,
where they were talking
Absolutely.
about raising funds
Absolutely.
for that. And I remember they were interviewing a doctor in South Africa, and they asked him, so how are you dealing with COVID? And he's like, we're dealing with HIV. That's a bigger problem in our country than COVID. And that was a big eye-opening thing because my kids were watching it too.
Yeah.
And so I had to explain what HIV is and how it, and all the things for them to understand. And they're like, that's worse for them than COVID. And I said, yes. And so we dug into why it's a problem and those things. So it opened my children's eyes to you live a privileged life in a first world country. And I've taught them to say that's a first world problem. That is a first world problem, not because even the poorest here in the US have nothing in problems compared to what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Here's another interesting question for you.
Yes.
What is something people seem to misunderstand about you and your work?
Oh, good question. So, I think what I would say that many times people don't know what the United Nations does. People really don't know. People see the United Nations, they see that big building in New York, the headquarters, and they see the Security Council like sitting around and discussing stuff, and then they really don't know that the United Nations, that political arm, is dealing with, they agree on things because the United Nations was actually created to maintain peace and advance human rights and promote justice, equality, and development. That is our mission, basically, okay? To do that, there are so many layers, there's so many different agencies that form the United Nations system. So there is the political arm, the Security Council, that deals with, things that are a threat to peace, they try to intervene on those. But then there are agencies underneath who have different mandates and areas of responsibility, which I always say is that we cover the whole spectrum of life. So we take the human being, and we know the human being, if it's a woman, they have women rights and they have reproductive health. They have so many different things. If it's children, we have UNICEF dealing with the children. We have UN Women dealing with the women affairs. We have the humanitarian affairs, like where I am here, where we coordinate everybody. We know what is needed and we coordinate with everybody. We say, guys, we need you, come here. We need this and that. We need the water people. So we have that for the human being, every aspect of a human being's life, including culture. We have the UN agency dealing with culture and economics and development. And then we have about 37,000 staff around the world. Yes, so it's one of it's the largest universal multilateral international organization. So 37 staff around the world in 193 countries, dealing with every aspect of life, whether it's environment, whether it's the water, what is the weather, every aspect of life we deal with. And so as we sleep, right now I'm talking to you from Geneva, Switzerland. As I'm in this country that is one of the richest in the world, you're in the United States there are people in the farthest corners of the world right now who are trying to help another person, who are looking at whoever is a stranger, whoever has run across the borders, whoever is displaced within their borders, whoever needs this, the poorest of the poorest, there are people who are working day and night. There are people who are trying to keep peace between, warring states. Sometimes it's inside the country itself. So I have found that we do a bad job in explaining what we do. So people just see the flag and they see the blue and they don't understand that the blue has so many things in it. They only see the political side and they're like, this is a very bureaucratic organization. No. And that is the same thing that is why people now know the World Health Organization. That's a UN agency. And their work is to look globally at the threats, the new, whatever is coming at us, and mobilize support immediately. So that the World Health, and then there's the World Food Program that is looking at hunger and just feeding. And there's the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So we have every aspect of life, basically. And we're just worker bees in these places, just doing our work, Well, I'm not looking up to say. So I've found that sometimes so many people don't understand exactly. They feel like we're just getting big salaries and just, they don't know, they don't see the very lonely and sacrificial side of it, that you have to leave your comfort and be in far-flung places where there is just nothing. And you find that their staff were there trying to just help people, for a better life. Yeah.
It's coming from an American perspective here. It's kind of like, we don't need your help, go away. mind your own business. You go help everybody else. You just leave us alone and let us live our life.
Yeah.
And we're looking at it from our, like the whole thing with the mask. Okay. I'm going to be blatantly honest.
Yeah.
I didn't wear mine unless I absolutely had to, because I'm like, look, this is America. You're not going to tell me I have to wear a mask.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even in my state, on April 6th, they dropped it. You don't have to wear a mask anymore because the numbers have really dropped low. But that's a cultural thing for us. We aren't used to living with wearing a mask all the time, where like in Asia, they have bad weather and then they have to wear a mask. So it's a whole mindset of mind your own business, leave me alone. And so the UN became the hot spot of, you need to mind your own business, go somewhere else and go help your people and leave us alone. But what you're explaining here is, sure, I want to help people, but I need your help to help people.
Yeah.
And so people have to think past, and this is not about whether you wear a mask or not, or whether you get the COVID vaccination or not. This is about just having a heart to serve others and realizing how blessed you are.
Absolutely. And also realizing that we are one. We are the human race and we are one. Okay. So my freedom ends, it has to be freedom with responsibility.
Yes.
So in Africa we have, and maybe you've heard about Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a South African word where I am because you are. Whatever I am here is because of you, because you are. So that is something that, and it's so funny when you brought up the mask thing. Let me tell you that when I was in Uganda, 2017 to 2019, and in 2018, of August of 2018, there was another outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo borders Uganda right from the north all the way to the south. And these two countries are some of the least developed countries in the world. If you look at the Human Development Report that the UN puts out ranking countries and where they are at, they're always at the bottom, We had an outbreak in this country and in Democratic Republic of Congo of Ebola, and we worked tirelessly and ensured that there was no transmission to Uganda. How come? We don't have the sophisticated, network with the capabilities that we have out here. No, these are the least developed. But we worked so hard that we made sure that throughout the outbreak in DRC, that killed so many people, actually, thousands, there was no transmission across the border. We did it by observing the protocols. We knew very well. The borders are so porous in Africa. Coming from one country to the next is just like going to across the street. There is nothing, They will just say, that is Uganda. This is DRC. We made sure that it did not cross over by just simple protocols. Watching the borders. Anytime you flew out of Uganda, you went to Kenya or whatever, at the airport, they would screen. All flights from Uganda, they screen you. Everybody, they're just screening and seeing whether you have fever or not. Washing of hands, just doing the basic protocols. And if there was a rumor that somebody escaped, came from DRC, the tracing, contact tracing. Anytime you heard there was somebody who was the contacts were traced to the last. And for 2 years, almost 2 full years, we had an outbreak in that other side of the border, and it never crossed over. That is where you see the power of humanity coming together, because it's a whole of society approach. If you want to stem this kind of thing, you have to take a whole of society approach, where everybody realizes, okay, you know what? This is no longer about me. It's no longer about me. This is about us as a community in this world, Because if we have it in Switzerland, you're not safe.
Right.
Right now, I take a flight 6 hours. I'm in New York from Geneva, Switzerland. It's just 6 hours. Yeah, I'm in New York. So that is how close we are these days. Okay. And that is how come somebody came from China to Italy.
Mhm.
And I'd been in Italy in February with a friend of mine who came from Australia. They were stranded trying to go out because the world just changed like that.
Hey everyone, I know that we are just getting started into this episode, but I had to cut the podcast episode in half to make 2 episodes because it was just too good to edit anything out. Be on the lookout because part 2, I promise, is worth the wait.
Hi, this is Lori Miller. I'm coming to you today with excitement for our first ad, and here we are on Samantha's podcast. So thrilled. So to tell you a little bit about ourselves, we're a tea boutique company, mother and daughter, Victoria and myself, Lori. We're a team My Loyal Tea Company, might as well say that here. We have premium, organic, loose leaf tea. We want to get the toxins out of your bodies. We're very active on Instagram and Facebook at My Loyal Tea Company, LOYALTEA Company, all spelled out. And our website is myloyalteacompany.com. So come join the fun.